All right, so we will be in 1 Samuel chapter 20. The story is that, I say his name is Doeg, but it's almost like a Doug type of deal to me. But, you know, what his role will play in this, and there's a couple of things too. I guess if you ever felt like there was people in your workplace or people around you that feel like that they jump at every opportunity to make themselves look better at that point in time.
Probably at everybody else's expense too.
That's right.
And getting that done.
And, you know, I think that's the other side too is, I think being in the workforce, you know, when you're in a corporation, what's your goal?
To contribute to the corporation and make it successful.
And
To do
move
your
up,
job well.
and then gradually, you know, just keep on moving up and, you know, be financially secure. And so, you know, I remember I'd call it the rat race. You could feel that where people would just, you know, somebody might make a mistake and then somebody takes the opportunity to go, hey, I haven't done that yet. And here you've got this person in this position. You know, who do you think would be better? And so I can relate to both sides of this in a way. And if we turn to 1 Samuel, and so the backdrop story is David is having to flee. It comes to the new moon. David has to meet with Saul for dinner. Obviously, Saul pretty much wants him killed. But Jonathan makes this oath to David. And I'll just say this in verse 16. It says, so Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan and David reaffirmed his oath out of love for him because he loved him as he loved himself. And so you hear that. And so they were supposed to go to the New Moon Festival. But he was hiding in the field. And so Jonathan's like, let me go check this out before you come in. And so basically at that time, it says Saul's anger. So I'm in verse 30. It says Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan. You son, a perverse and rebellious woman. Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. And so Jonathan asked, why should he be put to death? What has he done? The Saul hurled a spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. So that's kind of the backdrop story. And then so what David does, David obviously flees. And as we go further down the chapter, he goes to this place called, I forgot where it was at. Let me see. I know the priest's name is Amalek. Ahimelech? Where was that? Okay. So David goes to Nob. That's where it was. So he flees to Nob, and he talks to this priest. So now we're in 21. And so if somebody wouldn't mind reading 21, 1 through 9.
David went to Nob to Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered Ahimelech the priest, "The king charged me with a certain matter and said to me, 'No one is to know anything about your mission and your instructions.' As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find." But the priest answered David, "I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women." David replied, "Indeed, women have been kept from us as usual whenever I set out. The men's things are holy even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today?" So the priest gave him consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that has been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. Now one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's head shepherd. David asked Ahimelech, "Don't you have a spear or sword here?" "I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon because the king's business was urgent." The priest replied, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There is no sword here but that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me."
Okay, so what do y'all pick up on that story? Why was David leaving? Why was he fleeing?
Saul's trying to kill him.
David lies to the priest.
Okay. So here's David, who is basically fleeing from his life again and walks up. And so one of the ways that they describe it in the book is that, this priest is shaken because he knows that if David's right there, then this army of Saul should be coming with him because he doesn't know that David's just been kicked out. And so he conjures up this story. And from that story is, I'm on a secret mission, don't have any, my army is doing this and I'm doing this, but I need some bread. He's like, we've already given out fresh bread and all we have is stale bread. And he's like, that's fine, I'll take it. But how did they introduce Doeg? I guess that's how you say his name.
He was there. It just says he was there one day, detained before the Lord. He was Saul's chief shepherd.
Okay, so given a backdrop of that is Israel and Edom basically battled each other prior to. And so Saul, apparently this guy is a great warrior, but Edom lost. And so they became this servant, and now he's this chief servant. And so if you look through if you just look through a small scope, you can tell that Doeg is always looking to better himself because he's been tamed by the Lord. He is an Edomite, which is lost before, and now he's Saul's chief shepherd. And so, but right after they introduce Doeg, what does David ask for? A sword.
A sword. Some kind of one.
And so one of the things that the author was talking about is that, I guess that, through other scholars, this is basically how they were trying to visualize it, is as he goes up and starts talking to this priest, out of the corner of his eyes, he sees Doeg. And so because he saw him, he knew. The next question was, do you have a sword? Because there had to be something within his persona that David all of a sudden had a different reaction because he saw him. Now, For example, if I put this into the work world, is when we talk about mergers and acquisitions or coming into a company that, you know, probably one of the hardest things going into a different company that I had no background into is allowing people to trust me. And, you know, especially coming in as an executive officer that I have no idea about this industry.
The people there, you have to learn the people there.
And the average tenure of the people that work there, so I was basically the youngest starting, is 18 years. That's the average. We have people that have worked there for 40 plus years, and people there that I think the next person is like 10. The average was 18. So what do you think their loyalty to?
To each other.
To each other?
And
to the company?
Yeah.
And then so here comes this person in over here and starts kind of trying to change some things up. What do you think their mentality is?
Caution. Suspect.
That's right. Now, if you ever have that, I would kind of compare it to if a principal comes into a high school or into a school, he has to have the respect of the teachers, you have all this stuff. But what if you have the naysayers and the gossipers over here and the ones that are creating this toxic part? What is he going to do?
If he's smart, he's going to back off and get everybody to trust him first and not change everything at once.
Right? But if there's consistent toxicity, what does he have to do?
So move some people around, get rid of some people.
Clean house.
Yeah,
Clean house. And there's a story that he presented in here, and so y'all can relate to this one. Is there's he was an All-American football guy, played in the Canada Football League, and he comes back to Alabama, and he's in his senior years, and he's like, you know, I want to coach. And so gets a head coaching job at the small school from his home school, starts coaching. His assistant coach, who thought he should have had the job, but because, you know, of his notoriety, he got the job. So then that assistant coach starts, you know, undermining everything that head coach starts doing. Starts turning, you know, some of his good players against him. Starts turning some of the parents against him. Start turning, you know, the fans, and starts creating calls that would make the head coach look bad. And then about halfway through the season, AD goes, hey, there's too much turmoil going on. I've got parents beating down my doors. I'm just going to have to let you go. You know, sorry it didn't work out. And so if you can imagine that, it happens in all these different areas. And this is the Doeg. This is a guy that wants to create that animosity, that turmoil, so that A, he looks better, B, is undermining the person that he doesn't think should be in that position. And so what we'll go into is we'll read what happens when Doeg goes to Saul. So let's turn to, let's see where it's in chapter 22. So 22 verse 6. Turn to 6. Somebody read 6 to. Well, it's kind of a long one. If we can split up from 6 on to 22, if somebody wouldn't mind just reading 6 verses at a time, then that way that'll be enough.
Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered, and Saul was seated, spear in hand, under the tamarisk tree on the hill at Gibeah, with all his officials standing at his side. He said to them, "Listen, men of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son is inside of my servant to lie in wait for me as he does today." But Doeg the Edomite, who was standing with Saul's officials, said, "I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Adnob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine." Then the king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and all the men of his family, who were the priests of Nob, and they all came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." "Yes, my lord," he answered.
So where?
13.
The rest of it?
Yeah, 13, that's fine.
Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me? You and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and a sword and inquiring of God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me as he does today?" Amalek answered the king, "Who of all your servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? Was that day the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant or any of his father's family, for your servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair." But the king said, "You will surely die, Amalek, you and your whole family." Then the king ordered the guards at his side, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they too have sided with David." They knew he was fleeing, yet they did not tell me. But the king's officials were unwilling to raise a hand to strike the priests of the Lord. The king then ordered Doeg, "You turn and strike down the priests." So Doeg and the Edomite turned and struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He also put to the sword Nob, the town of the priests, and its men and women, its children and infants, and its cattle, donkeys, and sheep. But one son of Amalek, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled to join David. He told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, "That day when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul, 'I am responsible for the death of your whole family. Stay with me. Don't be afraid. The man who wants to kill you is trying to kill me too. You will be safe with me.'"
So, like I was saying earlier, at the beginning when they introduced Doeg, and I really don't know how to say that name, I'm assuming that's how you say his name. I keep on wanting to say Doug. It's like an older transition to Doug. So I'll just keep on calling him Doeg. They introduce him, and like I said, the author says, like whenever he saw him, again, the way I picture it is that, those people that know that gossip and they know that they do it, if they come around, your lips go a little tighter, you're paying attention to what people say, making sure you don't say anything or somebody around you doesn't say anything. And so I feel like that's how Doeg was. And so, so how did he take advantage of the situation, even if he was in Nob and either he had knew that David was being kicked out and already knows Saul's frustrations, or I guess the question I'm asking is, how do you think that Doeg took advantage of that situation from just seeing David?
He just kept it to himself, and then when it came up, he got to look like the hero. Hey, I know this, and I'm loyal.
And so one of the things that talks about what David, turn to Psalms 52, please. Or if anybody wants to turn to Psalm 52.
you want me to read the Psalm 52?
Sorry.
Okay. Psalm 32, 52.
Psalm 52.
Oh, okay.
And so, Psalm 52, so at the beginning of this, it says, for the director of music, a maskil of David, when Doeg the Edomite had gone to Saul and told him David has gone to the house of Ahimelech. And so verse 1, it says, why do you boast of evil, you mighty hero? Why do you boast all day long? You who disgrace in the eyes of God, you who practice deceit, your tongue plots destruction. It's like a sharpened razor. You love evil rather than good, falsehood rather than speaking the truth. You love every harmful word, your deceitful tongue. And so it goes down even further, and I like what it says. It says, the righteous will see and fear. They will laugh at you, saying, here now is a man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted his great wealth and grew strong by destroying others. So now when you read that, now think about how David felt when he saw Doeg. He knew right off the bat that, all right, do you have a sword? Because I do not trust that man. Mm-hmm. And so if he already had a reputation of that, then it makes more understanding of why David felt that way. But again, was David innocent in this whole situation? No. I mean, just like we were saying earlier, I mean, he created this convoluted story to make himself not being like, hey, Saul's about to kill me, I need help. Mm-hmm. So David penned the psalm that we just read. So he penned the psalm to hide Doeg's evil opportunity. What do we learn about what God thinks of opportunist behavior? Yes, behavior as how God deals with it.
This just pretty much says he hates deceit and using others to make yourself grow strong by destroying others.
And what I really like about it is, the way that not only that he practices deceit, his tongue plots destruction all the time. He would rather love evil than good. Again, always looking for himself to get the next step, always looking to destroy somebody else to make himself look better. Now, if we put that in layman's terms, can you see that in your work world or, I see it all the time in every corporation where the goal is to destroy somebody else to make yourself look better so that you can have that next little step. Or if you hear that somebody else gets a raise, what's your mindset?
Why did I get one?
That's right. So why do you think that David actually deceived Ahimelech?
I think he was just trying to flee for his safety.
And also, he can't be too sure of who he can trust. I mean, the whole country is supposed to be loyal to Saul. And they may or may not know of the difficulty that's going on between David and Saul. But one thing is for sure, you better be loyal to Saul as long as he's in power.
And that's where, to me, the second part of this lesson is that what do you think David should have done? Who should he consulted first?
God. He should have said, okay, God, I'm coming up to here to Ahimelech. I need this help. Please help me to get this. And been honest with Ahimelech. And maybe Ahimelech turns him down, knowing that God's going to provide it in some other way. Instead of, because his lie led to all of these deaths. Even if it was Doeg that, you know, actually acted and Saul, but we just don't know what our little lives, what the fallout is going to be.
Well, and in Psalms it says, I trust in your unfailing love in that chapter. But maybe that was after the fact. Fear maybe played a part in it.
Well, and whenever David's writing Psalms, it's definitely after the fact of the whole scenario. Well, and so I think that's the other side of it too, is because of our sinful nature, there's always going to be consequences for our actions. Now, while David was unharmed in the situation, unfortunately, what was the cause of his deceit to Amalek?
What happened because of it?
People were killed. Yeah. And so after that, I mean, just the way that David approaches the new guy, the one that escaped.
The son.
Yes. Abiathar?
Yeah, Abiathar.
And so, how is David's response to him after that?
He says, it's my fault. Stay with me. I'll protect you. You're safe with me.
And so that's where you see David's heart over and over again. You see him messing up and going, so dumb.
But
go ahead.
You know, it's true that because he lied and he involved an innocent person taking advantage of his ignorance of the situation. Because of that Doeg tells everybody, and a lot of people are killed. And yes, he was guilty of lying and involving these people in his plot. But the real guilt lies with Saul. Saul's the one who went nuts. Saul's the one who killed a whole city. Had somebody, it was because of Saul's sin that this all happened. David involved people that he shouldn't have. But Saul's the one. I mean, I think you're right. There's guilt enough to go around, but in the end, it was Saul who did the killing. So, and maybe David did involve people that he probably shouldn't have, but he's not the one who killed them.
That's right.
And I guess that's something for us to think about. Even our dishonesty or our fear might involve other people that shouldn't be involved. And we need to be careful of that. But it doesn't absolve the people who are really the ones who do the evil deed.
Well, and that's what, whether I was talking about, the story that he gave in the book about the head coach and the undermining assistant coach, or, I can tell you today that I ended up having to fire 4 out of the 5 that I wanted to. And after the fact, one of the employees that I kept said, now I understand why people just come in, wipe everybody out, and start new. And, so I look at Saul as being this CEO, and he's asking everybody that he can trust, and nobody would tell him the situation because they're afraid of him. Then you have this opportunist guy going, they won't tell you, but I will. And so when I look back at it too, it's like he also knew how to anger Saul just as much. And Doeg was a warrior. He's like, you know what? Since you did this, let's go. I mean, it's all these little deals that just play into it. And I can just see Saul going, look, nobody will tell me anything. And he's like, I'll tell you something.
Well, yeah, when the CEO is unbalanced and unstable and has an evil spirit, that
well, that's
makes it all that much worse.
Well, and so I joke. I mean, the reason why I ended up leaving my last one was because we went through 4 CEOs or almost 5 CEOs, within an 18-month period. And so each one that was coming in, it was like redoing the whole financial scenario and redoing the business model. And I was tired, you know? And so, I mean, you could see this transition every time. And eventually it's kind of like, I'm done. You know, I'll go somewhere else that's a little bit more laid back. And so I can see how people were positioning themselves nonstop. And that's how I relate this to this, is that you can tell that Doeg knew exactly what he was doing, exactly when he saw David. That's the reason why he went back to Saul. And apparently he was a trusted servant. And was like, you know what? We got to go. So I look at it all, these little bitty kinks all the way through of that created this, and the ball just kept going and going and going and going. But the after the scenario, let's look at Psalms 141. And let's go to 3 and 4. Verses 3 and 4. Let's not David. Oh, go ahead. Go. No, you go.
Take control of what I say, O Lord, and guard my lips. Don't let me drift toward evil or take part in acts of wickedness. Don't let me share in the delicacies of those who do wrong.
And you know, one of the things that I tell my kids day in, day out. Well, there's 2. I always tell them, help, take up for those that can't take up for themselves. That's always been a big one in our house. And then the last one is always sit there and say, how are you more like Christ today than you were yesterday? And when we're at the table or something, we'll sit there and talk. And our mouths will get us in more trouble from teenage years. And it goes on and on and on. And so that's like, especially having a teenage daughter, I mean, all you have to do is just talk just a little bit, and then that thing just explodes. And so using the mouth, I mean, that's what David was saying, is guard my mouth. Know my lips, that if I start to say something, shut it off.
Like James talks about it being such a powerful.
Well, and then, and even Philippians, if we look at Philippians, I mean, how our heart and our mind is to be connected with Christ and to use our words in a way that is for Christ and nothing else. And that's what, so as I went through this several times yesterday again, I noticed that the things that Jonathan and David started at the beginning with this covenant created this issue with Saul. And then Saul just, he threw a spear at his own son. Then that boiled down to David lying. And then all this stuff is all because of the mouth. And I think that's what for me, that's what that whole story was about, is about how we use our words and how we utilize, it rang. Sorry.
Well, he's shepherd's prayers on.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
I always forget. So I guess the last thing that I have written down is, what is the difference between properly taking advantage of opportunities that God may be blessing you with, as against following an ungodly path of opportunity? Opportunity?
Hear that again. Say the whole thing again.
Here, you read it out loud.
Okay.
It's the exact same thing I just said.
What is the difference between properly taking advantage of opportunities that God may be blessing you with, as against following the ungodly path of opportunism.
I think one big difference is treating other people, how you treat other people.
On examining your heart, what is it that you really want out of this? Is it for God's glory or your own glory? And if the focus is on me, then there's a problem.
Well, and that's what y'all get to see in the second service, is that holiness that renders within our heart. Is if there's true holiness, what you're doing day in and day out is a reflection of Christ, versus this opportunity of being unholy and doing it my way, you know, the way that I want to achieve my goal versus the way that God wants to guide me through to meet a goal of mine. That may not be the goal that I'm thinking of. And I think that's the challenge that we have.
You nailed it when you said earlier, like it's the difference in worshiping God and making choices as opposed to involving God in all of the choices. Because I think that happens a lot. You know, you hear about Christians in different situations and they're not involving him in each decision, obviously.
I went over. Let's go to Father in prayer. Thank you. Father, we come before you now and we praise you for the stories of your word, giving us insights, whether it's several thousand years ago, to be able to see the exact same situations that are happening today, and for us to seek you in every situation that we're involved in. God, I pray that you give us strength to seek your will, and forgive us when we take our selfish desire over your will. God, I pray that you give us strength to be a reflection of Christ, and to not only reflect him, but to involve our heart and to be able to repent and take that 180 and to see you versus seeing the desires that we want. God, give us strength to seek you in everything we do. In your son's name we pray. Amen.